Here's the story of 2020. It was a year for us to live in sync. So many things that need our understanding. It's time for us to think. It's the story of fellow humans who were busy with lives of their own. But they thought of bringing us together, and we can watch from home. We can all make this world much better. It's about what we're willing to confront. So sit back and enjoy the conversation of these rainbow warriors called the Queer Bunch. The Queer Bunch. The Queer Bunch. It's a great day to watch the Queer Bunch.
Spring is in the air. I actually don't know the rest of the words, so I'm not even going to bother
Thank
singing
God.
the Welcome, viewers, co-hosts, and guests. Today's episode is about a topic that is both sensitive and can be triggering for some folks, so please look after yourselves. We are talking about substance use, harm reduction, and allyship today, a topic that really isn't new to many of us in the 2S LGBTQ+ community, but yet we are seeing more and more folks using, especially during the pandemic. So what do we do at the Queer Bunch when we want to address a topic that's much needed? Well, we actually talk about it, and very openly. And actually, here's one thing for the viewers that we've never mentioned before, that our questions are not sent ahead of time to our guests at all. So what does that mean is that the answers that they provide, they are extremely genuine and extremely honest, and they are not rehearsed. So, which is one thing that we pride ourselves about at the Queer Bunch.
It's as real as it gets.
So yes, it really is. And today we have two incredibly genuine guests on the show, and I can't wait to introduce them. But before I introduce them, I always like to do a check-in with my co-host. And one of these co-hosts is not like the others today.
I like that line. Good choice.
And it's Tyllin Cordero. Ty is one of our guest co-hosts today, filling in for Alfonso, who could not be with us. Ty and I used to work together actually at the Alliance for South Asian AIDS Prevention, also known as ASAP. That's how we know each other. Ty actually uses the pronouns he, him, and he migrated to Canada in 2018 and has been working with ASAP as the Men Outreach Coordinator and is now the manager of sexual health programs over the last 2 years. Moving on up. He has been working with the South Asian, Middle Eastern, and Indo-Caribbean communities doing outreach, volunteer engagement, pride events, and fundraising, or building strong relationships with partner agencies. Over the last 2 years, he has enjoyed every bit of the community work that he has been involved with, including even during the difficult times during the pandemic right now. COVID-19 has taken a toll, but that has not changed his focus at all, and his dedication still stands very firm. He's a proud dad to an adorable doggo who has been his savior and key influence in getting him through this pandemic. Ty! I'm so excited to have you on the show today. How are you doing? And girl, that hair, honey.
It's all okay.
Thank you, Kero. That was a fantastic introduction. And well, I'm doing great. And I'm really, really happy to be among all of you amazing people today. So thank you, Kero.
We're very happy to have you here today, Ty. Ticha, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I just want to say spring is in the air with the snow we had this morning. So just
there's other people watching that don't know about that.
and I'm doing good. I'm feeling a sense of relief after the Derek Chauvin was convicted. Guilty. And hopefully that'll be a move towards reform.
You got a new job also.
What's that?
You got a new job.
You have a new job. I'm now the human rights business representative at the International Brotherhood of Electrical.
Our Ticha is also going up.
Moving on up. Viviana, how are you doing?
Oh, I am doing great. Very, very excited because I just got news. I remember I said something last program we had. So maybe the next one I will be more like I will be able to say publicly what it's out there. So I will be
Don't tease us.
I will be very, very busy this coming month, but I am really, really happy and really excited. And talking about today, I mean, I can't wait to have this conversation. This is gonna be something that there's so much stigma around this, and a lot of people doesn't like to talk about it. So let's talk about this, and then let's make sense of this today. So yeah, very, very excited about it.
She also has great hair.
She also and a lovely dress.
And her dress, she
dress.
serves it every freaking episode. I'm gonna raid your wardrobe, Viviana. And finally, the last person, my co-producer, also the thrown in my side, Antoine.
Don't start on me, or I'll twist that thorn on your side. I'm doing good, thank you. Very busy. We got my volunteer side, we got the Inspire Awards 10th anniversary coming up. Yay! It's gonna be a fantastic celebration. On the Inspired Media side, we're opening the Pink Pages directory in South Africa. On my queer publishing side, we just got a few really awesome books coming up for queer authors. And on my music side, under Elhashem, I'm recording a couple of new songs, and I'm performing at Pride Toronto. So lots happening.
Yep. Very exciting. You are very busy, Antoine, and I don't know how you the energy for it all, but
awesome. I drink a lot of Tim Hortons. I just gave them a plug. We gotta be calling them for money.
You just pulled a Doug Ford with your Tim Hortons. Anyway, today we have two amazing guests, and of course, and as always, our guests are always fabulously awesome. But first, I'm going to introduce you to Jordan Bond-Gorr. I call him the Bond for when it comes to PNP because he is a superhero with that. Jordan currently works at the Gay and Sexual Health Alliance as the project assistant on their upcoming PNP campaign, where he has spearheaded several initiatives. He also is a part-time peer educator in Toronto and delivers workshops on a variety of PNP. By the way, PNP means party and play related topics. Jordan is committed to ending the silence and stigma that surrounded the PNP community and ensuring that queer guys who party have access to affirming care and accessible, culturally competent harm reduction. When he's not being an advocate, he's usually in the East End of Toronto, Ontario, watching Drag Race or Star Trek. You speak to my heart, Jordan. Jordan, it's so good to have you on the show. I've seen you in action with the Alliance, and you are one incredible human, and I'm so excited that you are here as a guest today. How have you been doing with everything going on?
Oh gosh, I've been surviving, and I think that's enough for me. Every day's a new day, and some days are good and some days have been really tough. I mean, the pandemic has been tough on members of my community, and in turn it's been tough on me. But I think right now I'm feeling pretty good. We're about to launch the campaign. We've got a series of videos that are going to come out that are going to blow everybody's mind. So I'm excited for that. I'm feeling pretty good.
That's awesome. Thank you again, Jordan, for being here today. And next we have, and I want to make sure that I pronounce his name with the passion, the way he says it, is Francisco Ibanez-Carrasco. Did I say that right? Yes. Okay,
good job.
Thank you.
When I heard you say it earlier, I'm like, I gotta say it by rolling the R's. Francisco Rack's somewhat richer story started with migrating from Chile to Canada in 1985, from poverty and military dictatorship to getting HIV in 1986 at 23 years old, and pursuing a thrilling combo of activism, teaching, writing, and community-based research. Currently, he is an assistant professor at the Dalai Lama School of Public Health, University of Toronto. He's a fiction and nonfiction author. His memoir of living with HIV, Hep C, and doing bad things, giving it raw, was published in 2015. Francisco, we never really had the chance to work together, you and I, but I've heard so much about you, and I've had the pleasure to watch you work from afar on panel discussions and actually at a Glad Day as well. So we're so happy to have you here on the show today, and I actually want to thank Alfonso for telling us originally we were going to have him as a guest co-host, but with his wealth and knowledge, I'm like, he needs to be a guest.
He needs to be on the hot seat.
How have you been doing, Francisco?
I'm good. You don't want me asking questions really, because I don't ask easy questions. First of all, thanks to everyone who's watching, and thank you all, the two of you, Antoine, Kero, because I'm thrilled by an invitation always. It never gets easier, and it's never, I'm never too important to be in any kind of meeting talking with people. So I'm just thrilled to be here. Things are okay. I mean, I have to say, from a privileged position as a settler in this land that I want to acknowledge, right? In Toronto, I have to say that I'm okay, but I keep my eyes open and my heart open to see what's going on with other folks.
That's wonderful. Thank
Very
you so
nicely
much,
said.
Francisco.
Yeah.
That's and that's very important. Both you and Jordan, honestly, and I love how your check-in was very based on the now, and I think that's part of the big conversation on taking it day by day, especially with what we're going through, and we connect with a lot of you. And folks, now that we have met our guests, we know what everyone we know how everyone is feeling. We are looking forward to the conversation, and we are going to be having this conversation right after this commercial break.
Yay.
Tyler!
I just found out I've got HIV. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm scared.
Hey, I know you're scared. I've been living with HIV for 25 years, and with treatment today, I'm living a long, healthy life. You can too.
Maybe I will be okay.
Welcome back, folks, and just a reminder to our viewers again that today we are talking about a topic that can be triggering for some viewers, and that's okay. So please take care of yourself and your mental health. It is a priority, and we will not be offended if you pause this for a moment to walk away. If you need to do that, please do that. So now that I said that, let's get this conversation started, and I want to start with our guest host, Ty.
Thank you, Kero. So one of the things that, this topic obviously is very close to my heart. It's something that we've been trying to work and establish within the South Asian, Middle Eastern, and Indo-Arabian communities that we work with closely. And one of the things that we did realize over a period of time is there is a lot of stigma and shame attached to the PNP part of whether you do it as outreach, whether you try to connect with people who are into PNP. There's a lot of sense of shame that's attached to it, and that's why not a lot of people do come forward confidently to say that they are they're part of PNP. But also working with this over the last 2 years, the one thing I've realized is since we've had a lot of people that have moved to Canada over a period of the last 5 years, there's one question that often comes to my mind, and that is, especially for newcomers, what advice would you give for newcomers who are basically participating in unsupervised drug use? Because a lot of these people are youngsters, they're absolutely new. It's not that they've done drugs before, and maybe a lot of times they don't have someone to supervise what they're doing. So a lot of times, these questions do come up. Like, what are the steps I should take? What should I do? What's considered safe? So I would like to know what advice you would give to a newcomer.
Either of you could take the questions.
Yeah.
It's a tough question. Francisco?
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? So my question would be very domestic. My answer would be very domestic, and it comes from having talked to for 35 years that I've lived in Canada with recent immigrants and young immigrants, as I was once, and these days, I think the most basic thing I would say to anybody, and I do talk to young Latinos, Latinx who are using drugs and they love partying and that, is that they tell someone. I know we have gadgets and the gadgets tell people where you are, but we have, without putting too sinister a note on it, the case of Bruce Bruce MacArthur, right? And so I think it's important to tell, just so we know, your friends or somebody knows where to go, whom to call. I know it's very basic, but I think it has to do with this spotting harm reduction strategy that you would tell at least one person what you're going to do.
Actually, I'm just thinking while you're saying that, it's sometimes it's the stigma is you're ashamed to tell anybody, but it's safer to tell somebody rather than risk your life, obviously. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know what's strange is in life, in our life before COVID, is that we're always more, in a way, we feel that we can tell our complete life to a stranger at the bus stop, and now we can do that online. So I'm not surprised when sometimes young folk, because they see me as a daddy and I identify with that, they just spill it over. They feel they can trust. I'm not going to go anywhere with information. The only thing on my side is that I acquired as a responsibility. Even if I'm playing with somebody, they're my responsibility, and I hope I'm theirs.
Yeah. Very good, Francisco. Thank you. Jordan.
I really like what Francisco had to offer. I think that's a really good first sort of step. What else I would recommend is I would recommend that people sort of analyze their drug experiences after they happen. Take some time to sit and think and reflect on what went well, what didn't go well, what they wanted to change, how they felt about it overall, and take time to do that each and every time, because you can learn a lot from those experiences about what your red flags are, about what your boundaries are, about what you want and don't want, and that helps build up sort of efficacy in terms of advocating for yourself in P&P spaces. It's really tricky out there, and I don't come from the perspective of a newcomer to Canada, but I know that there's a lot of different barriers facing them. There's language hurdles, there's cultural hurdles. There's people who will take advantage of them in the community, so they need to have their wits about them, but reflecting on their substance use patterns is a good place to start.
I really, really like that, Jordan. Actually, it's something that I think I've done it naturally during my substance use days as well. So this is wonderful, actually. And I think it's not reiterated enough, because I think once you start doing this right off the beginning, letting people know that you're using is super important. Letting someone that you trust that will check in on you, and then going through the experience after that. And I think that could reduce trauma from the experience for a lot of people. It's okay, and then make them feel less ashamed, and make them say, okay, that was the experience with that. What is it that I could do differently next time, and so on. That's wonderful. Thank you for that. And I think that's a good segue for Antoine's question that he has.
Well, I was gonna say, let's go back a couple of steps and explain harm reduction. Where does the concept come from? How effective is it? Do we have any lived experiences that we can share to show what harm reduction can be? Probably start with Jordan, I guess, if he wants to take that.
Sure, I'll take on the history of harm reduction and what it does and all that jazz. So, I mean, feel free to correct me if I get stuff wrong, because the historical part of it, I have a smattering of an understanding. But harm reduction is a concept that's been around for quite a long time. It sort of regained popularity in the 80s during the early years of the AIDS crisis, when IV drug users were dying at a disproportionate rate and something had to be done. So they looked at ways of minimizing the immediate harms that were causing HIV, right? So shared needles, etc. And so it became a pragmatic step, because the climate at the time was you should stop using drugs or be damned, you know. And this was a really novel strategy to be like, no, we can reduce the harm and make people's lives better, even if they continue to use drugs. And I think harm reduction, as I would define it, not as sort of it's defined in a formal sense, would be a person-centered or a drug user-centered set of principles and a way of sort of looking at drug use that is about minimizing the harms to self and others that makes sense to the individual who is using drugs. Right? So it's not prescribed from without, it comes from within, it's community driven, and it really is about taking pragmatic, simple steps to reduce harms. And that's how I would define it. And you wanted a lived example as well?
If you're comfortable to do that, if you have it, yes, absolutely.
I have a few. I mean, I think a lot of people think harm reduction means like reducing use, but outside of reducing use, I mean, I've had experience where I'm an IV drug user. and I really wanted to limit my IV drug use. So I switched to booty bumping because it's safer, it gives my veins a chance to heal, and it reduces the immediate harm that is being caused by the injection, which is a big anxiety of mine. So,
Okay.
you know, taking a small step, even just in the route of administration, can make a big difference. And you know, once I have some success with that, like it builds on other successes that I can have. So if I want to make another change in reducing use, or maybe moving to smoking next, I can do that. So, it's
So
nice.
whatever it is that could reduce the is calling your friend harm reduction and leaving and letting them know where you got. That's harm reduction. right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Taking what you need with you in a little kit kind of thing. That's harm reduction.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Could be many ways that could help you survive and enjoy the experience, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Francisco.
Francisco.
Well, this is making me think. I mean, I don't have anything else to add in terms to what Jordan said because he just presented it very clearly. The only thing I would kind of mention is that there's a historical, as he mentioned as well, political and health, a public health movement in Canada, at least in the time that I've lived in Canada, and that's been really important because they, and by that I mean persons who with lived experience use of substances, as well as politicians and clinicians, they really push the envelope. We wouldn't be where we are in terms of safe injection sites and needle exchanges and other programs if these people consistently, rapidly have not been pushing this agenda. I think the political piece is crucial these days, and it is political.
Yeah, of course.
Very much so.
Yeah, and that's you couldn't be more right about that, Francisco. It is very political. I mean,
If
it's
enough
how
people
it
speak
started.
up, politicians will have to listen. Things will have to happen.
Yeah, I mean, well, things need to change in terms of harm reduction approaches. We're still seeing some very dated progress in terms of harm reduction, right? So one of the things I want to mention about harm reduction as well, what's great about it is it helps you to make decisions on a very non-judgmental perspective. And that's so important because and I'm going to talk for myself here as the host of the show. I am, a substance user. I was a substance user for a very long time, and especially I became homeless because of it. And, harm reduction saved my life. If it was not for harm reduction and understanding what it is, I would never have understood how to handle rejection, how to handle also cultural rejection within the gay community and segregation within the gay community that happens. It's a reality of it. The body shaming, there's so many layers that led me, and I didn't even know that's why I was using. Harm reduction helped me create awareness to my use, so then I could be able to enjoy the experience later on and be able to keep a job, be able to stay alive and not overdose, and be able to create a show like the Queer Bunch. It does save lives. I'm a living proof, and a few of us here are living proof, and I don't want to talk on behalf of anyone else, but we see it. It saves lives like no other. And it's so important because it creates conversation. It helps people open up. It helps remove the shame. It helps remove the stigma. Harm reduction is so much more than just talking about it. There's action behind it as well.
I'm
right?
of the generation of the circuit body. I haven't been a circuit body guy for 20 years, but even back then, you need to take your water. You need to take your water, watermelon, and eat in between in order to reduce, the effect of ecstasy or whatever you're taking. So even as far as that, surviving and protecting yourself and telling your friends where you're going, were a good thing to do. We all want to enjoy ourselves, but we all also hopefully want to survive the experience. So,
one of the things that we recommend more than ever right now as a harm reduction practice is having an naloxone kit available, whether it's at a bar or a club or so on. And I'm bringing that up very so subtly. So Jordan, Jordan can show us a naloxone kit. Jordan, talk to us about naloxone.
Oh, so naloxone is a substance that is used to reverse the effects of an opioid overdose.
Okay.
So we've been talking a little bit about party and play, and that tends to focus on stimulants, but opioids can show up in any number of substances across the board. We're seeing that with cocaine and with crack and other drugs that you're not expecting to see things like fentanyl in. So it's a life-saving medication, and glory be, I have one of the injection kits, and I thought I had one of the nasal spray kits. So I don't
okay.
actually know how to do the injection kit. I was trained on the nasal spray.
Yeah.
So there's you can administrate 2 ways, nasally and injection. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
The injection, they're starting to discontinue making them slowly
Oh.
and change it to just nasal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why so?
Jordan, do you want to answer that?
I would assume it's because it's less intimidating for casual users. I mean, I'm terrified of giving somebody a needle.
Yeah.
Oh,
The opportunity.
If I
to
was
injure
using
somebody.
something, I don't know if I would want
There
to
are-
inject on top of that.
well, there are 2 things about it. It's you're injecting someone with a needle. So if someone else is using, they may not have stable hands or anything and stabbing and freaking out. I've actually seen it happen.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, okay, this
Yeah,
is not good.
kind of.
But also the other thing with the injectable is it comes with a glass ampoule that you need to break. So so the ampoules have been problematic. And
Yeah, it would break in my hand, knowing me. Yeah.
yeah. Well, the thing is, you're supposed to break the top, but they provide you with something to be able to break gloves and so on. You know, that's how it looks like. So it's got a plastic tip. You break the plastic tip off, but it could still be very sharp on the other edge. So the nasal one is very simple because it's just one.
Yeah.
And that's it. And it's like Jordan said, it is life-saving. So in terms of those,
Where do you get them? How do you get them?
So I know that some pharmacies are giving them out. I know that you can order them. I ordered 2 online. I did a training and a quiz online.
Okay.
At the end of the program, maybe I can find the link to share with Kero for the audience. But I did my training online. I got the kits mailed to me in about a week.
Nice.
Lots of other community-based organizations are offering training. Shout out to Max Ottawa, which is one of our alliance members. They're doing an online naloxone training that you can go to their website and do at any point. So
I gave naloxone training as well through ACDR. We also have our harm reduction needle exchange programs. We give naloxone kits as well. So there are a few programs around the GTA that are and community partners that are giving away naloxone kits, and it's easy to get access to now, which is great. And so it's I always have one on me, and if I know I'm going to go to a party or anything like that, I definitely carry one on me. When I had my Middle Eastern Nights event, I always had it on me, and I used to tell the bartenders, I'm like, I have it on me, just in case, right? But one thing to remember, and that Jordan made
that's harm reduction. That's being ready to help somebody else.
Yeah, it's a harm reduction approach. It's a harm reduction approach, right? One thing to remember, though, again, and it can't be more upfront about this. It's
clear.
It's for opiates. It does not work. So if someone overdoses on GHB or any other substance that does not have opiate in it, it is not going to work.
It won't hurt them if they take it, but it won't work to reverse.
It won't work. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jordan. Did you want to add anything else about the naloxone kit?
Let me see here. Nothing comes to mind. But at the end of the program, if something comes up, I will make mention of it.
I was going to interrupt on something else. You mentioned ACDR, where you retrained. I don't know if all our audience know that one of our partners is the AIDS Committee of Durham Region, where Kero is. What are you again?
I'm the Men of Sex with Men Outreach Coordinator there. Yeah. So if you want to get in touch with me and you're in the Durham region and you need a naloxone kit, I could definitely give the resources. Or if you go on to msmdurham.com/the queer bunch is also on there. But there's a list of resources of hubs in the Durham region where you could get one.
Perfect.
As well. And you could get supplies as well for party and play, Chemsex, and so on. Ticha.
Hello. I just make sure the audience is clear that they're free as well, right?
Yep, they're free.
So my question, I guess I'll start with Francisco. It's multi-layered. If someone is using a substance that you worry might be impacting their lives and relationships, what do you recommend? And is there like workshops or literature or a helpline they could call for guidance? For example, I've taken a mental health first aid training, and I found that helpful to know how to deal with certain situations. Is that something you would recommend preparing folks, or is there something else you think is helpful for somebody you care about? And for our audience, what are some signs to look for? And also, just kind of as an add-in, what do you think about further legalization of
Good
substance?
question.
Okay, that's all multi-layered.
That's
So
a lot of questions.
legalization, decriminalization, there should always be our signposts. I think we have amazing examples. And the caveat here is I don't want to pose as an expert on harm reduction. What I've done is a great deal of allyship, particularly in the beginning of this year with a series of table talks where people who are in the life at the moment have come and told me their experience, and we made it public as well. So one experience that is really interesting is what Mark Tyndall is doing in BC, where they have dispensers. Of course, it's a pilot, and Jordan, you can remind me, the dispensers are for opioids, I think.
Yes.
And so, which of course, 10 years ago would have been a completely crazy idea for which you would have been more or less pillared, right? So that answers that. So I'm going to go back to your question about symptoms and what I would do and what I have done when I suspect that someone's life is
Danger.
not as they used to be, right? I don't want to talk about danger or anything like that. Usually, I don't recommend, becoming the savior and the hero of anyone, because we've all tried to do it, and most of the time does not work, right? Like, I want to save you from yourself. It doesn't. I don't think that
wrong
works.
approach. Yeah.
A very
Wrong approach.
self-righteous approach.
Absolutely, right? But rescuing is very normal. Some of us are so codependent, right? When people have a silence in a conversation, I'm always, or I used to be, now I'm older, the one to try to save the conversation. Then you start thinking, that's not my place, and that's not how I'm doing the best thing for my friend or the person that I know.
Okay.
However, if there is a trace of a relationship, meaning it's someone you've been having sex with, or it's a friend, or you know them a little bit, then there's a relationship where you can stand on your 2 feet and say, hey, what's up, right? And I always recommend using very plain language and being transparent. I've seen you kind of missed a lot of meetings, you're missing your doctor's appointments, you're pointing at real things, not this romantic idea that I see you're in trouble, girl, right? Like Whoopi Goldberg in that movie. Girl, you're in danger.
girl.
Right? I mean, she could do it, she had that power, but we don't have that superpower. So that, I think, is central. And if you really want to help them, be informed first. Second, I do work, and I'm friends and close friends with people who willingly use and are currently use drugs for medication, for forgetting, for pleasure. So I have to check myself, check my privilege, check my entitlement of saying, like, Ticha, well, you should not be doing that. Like, who the fuck am I, right?
Yeah.
I think that's central. So the reflection needs to start with yourself, as you well mentioned before.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. Jordan.
So Francisco, again, you said that beautifully. Thank you for taking all the heat on that question. But I think what I would add to that is that we need to be more inquisitive with folks who use drugs in our lives. Often we come at it with the approach that they're using drugs, they're in trouble. We don't analyze that any further. We just make the assumption. A lot of people who use drugs don't develop into addiction, don't develop into problematic substance use, and they can just have a casual relationship. So we don't want to rush into assumptions, and we want to ask the person that we're concerned about, like, how they feel about their relationship with the drug. They may not feel it's a problem. And I think sort of knowing that if they don't feel it's a problem, they're not going to address it because they don't feel it's a problem. You can't make them feel it's a problem. It has to come from within the individual. And I think that's a real, just common sense, I guess, in terms of like how people actually deal with their problems. When we own that problem, we're more willing to make a change.
Yeah.
I really would love to see people be more inquisitive about these kind of things, like asking questions of people who use drugs instead of making assumptions. But I get where it comes from. We live in a stigmatizing culture, in an abstinence-focused kind of culture. There's only 2 stories about addiction, right? You're either deep in active addiction and it's terrible, or you're recovering from it. And there's no other sort of nuance to it. There's no other shade of gray. And there's a lot of moralistic.
Could it be because you really care about them, but you are uneducated and you don't know how to approach the topic?
Could be that, yeah. And I think you asked a question, Ticha, about are there any supports in place in the community for that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Francisco, I don't know if you know of anything else, but I do know that out of ACT, they were doing a friends and family support group for guys who PMP.
Okay.
I don't know if it's still going. I can find that out for you, but that was something that was a very new sort of intervention because there's not a lot out there. Some treatment programs in the drug and mental health sector, addictions and mental health sector, I should say, they have programs for friends and family, but they're not queer specific or anything dealing with our community. They can be very generic, like, you know, substance use supports. So
I think for the viewers, what I would always say is just, you know, expect that bad shit happens because that sometimes happens, and it was not your fault that the person overdosed or you didn't call them in 2 weeks and they did more cocaine. I think that's super important. Second, that we're grossly underfunded, particularly for things like meth and those particular big. Why that's a longer conversation, but it's very difficult to find the support for in remote and rural areas, for example. And sometimes we see the spikes in those areas more than in the inner city or the city of Toronto, where we know where to go.
Okay.
Thank you both.
Yeah, and
Jordan said something that got me thinking. Intervention. Is anyone of us qualified to say whether it works or not, whether it's a good idea or not?
Oh, I shouldn't have used that word. Intervention's a loaded term. I'm not talking about the intervention where you sit down and we all talk about your problem. Like, I'm talking more about like interventions in terms of social work programming, like a support group or a drop-in. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to react to that, not because you said it, Jordan, but because we've managed to pathologize a lot of the language around it, right? So when you say harm reduction, we go immediately to injecting drugs, right? And the phrase technically can be applied to a lot of different things. I've done a lot of reading on people who are pathologized because they eat too much, right? And and you know how well it goes when you say, well, you shouldn't eat that much, right? Or with a partner, with sometimes with a stranger is easier, but with somebody you know, to say things like that, right, is like saying you should be less queer and less effeminate. What kind of intervention is that?
And those are very good points. And intervention very often also because of the show that was on that. Exactly. For those of us who work in harm reduction, understand that show is everything that's wrong when it comes to harm reduction approaches. It's for money. It's not the right, like, but that was my introduction to that, and I'll never forget during my substance use. I was like, oh my god, I thought I became so paranoid from using.
That your family is going to show up at your door.
Whenever we get together, that is going to be an intervention.
It's a white man's version, an Anglo-normative version of intervention, right? Intervention might look very different in different cultures and in different contexts, but the idea of a heterosexual white Anglo man is that of the show.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Actually, that's very good.
Thank you. Viviana, sitting there quietly, listening, absorbing it all.
No, because this is very interesting to hear and to talk about. But I'm gonna kind of like switch things a little bit around to talk about specifically about a topic, because we're talking about so much in general, so much broader, and we haven't given an example of something for people to be guidance towards and what we're talking about. So I'm gonna talk about, and I wanna hear from you, folks. I'm gonna talk about a topic that it's very, very common in our community. It's used pretty much most every time. I would say 90% that a lot of people have in relations, sex relations, but people doesn't talk about it. They don't add this product to the list of substance that can lead to get used to this. I don't want to say that you have to have it, but most of the time, yes. So I'm actually talking about poppers. I'm talking about this product that a lot of people keep using it, and they think it's a friendly. They think it's just something for me just to feel better and to perform better. I don't know who like the passive of. It comes different ways, right? But I want to use this topic to give an example to our viewers out there to what we're talking when we talk about harm reduction and how people think that this product is not harmful. that it's nice. And the thing is, when we have been in so many of the workshops about harm reductions, and they never bring up this topic about poppers and the new generation, they think it's a friendly substance to use it, and they never talk about the side effects that this product actually has
long-term use
in people. So I want to hear from you two folks. Yeah, you know.
Jordan, should I claim the first spot just because I'm older?
The poppers generation.
Yeah. I started using poppers. I started using poppers when I was in Chile,
God.
actually.
The barn used to stink when we go dancing.
In the 1980s. So first I have to say that I have read very little research on the use of poppers, so I know very little about it, but it is a good example. It's one of those things that I think demonstrates that not everybody who uses them or uses anything, including sugar, will become an addict, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a common idea.
Yeah.
The second is that many persons who have lived experience using anything age out of it. Life tells you in a number of ways, and people are not stupid, right? This idea that the person who's consuming some kind of substance is completely rational and crazy, will not be able to understand what their body's telling them is crazy. So I aged out of poppers because now it just gives me a heart palpitation and it makes my head want to explode. That was the only reason. So I think it's important to understand that people do age out of a number of substances. When I dabbled into using meth, and I was in my 40s, and just the idea, I take two cups of coffee, and I'm like there, exactly the same, right? I'm like ready. I'm quite nervous.
That's very strengthening of people's idea that we are responsible and we know what we're going through. Good, very nice.
And we're sentient beings. We know when shit doesn't work well. I mean, if you eat too much KFC, you'll have a stomach ache.
Yeah.
Mara Brown's chicken does not give me stomach aches. How dare
I don't think I've ever stopped something because somebody else told me. I've always stopped things because my body said stop. Fair enough. Okay, cool.
I mean, we've had experiences of a certain point. I know that the smell of a firebomb, the drink, will make me immediately gag because I had one bad experience of vomiting from it. And it used to be like I would do like 5 of them at one night, like in a row at Cruise and Tangles, until one time, just sorry for the viewers, but just like all the Thai food just exploded on the dance floor.
Thank you.
So, anyway, Francisco, back to what you're saying in terms of
there you go. That's a very good point. We all okay. Keep any more to add, Francisco?
No, I love poppers. Look, I'm completely normal.
Funny face.
Jordan.
Yeah, I think one thing I would maybe challenge is that the poppers themselves have harm. Like, yes, they can have harms associated with them, but the relationship that people have with that substance is what sometimes makes it more harmful. Is it like they're using them all the time in excess? Are they using them with other drugs that they might not want to be using them with? Because there's interactions between poppers and Viagra, as we know.
Sure.
That relationship is where I tend to focus my attention. Like, what is my relationship with poppers? And if it's problematic, then I need to start to look at ways to change that. But the drug itself is just sort of a neutral substance. It has good qualities, it has bad qualities, but it isn't like the harm in and of itself. I tend to look at it as the relationship we have with the substance is where the harm happens.
That's so true, particularly if you're in a bathhouse and you drop the entire bottle up your nose. Not that it's ever happened to me, but I've read a lot of testimonials.
Oh, I've seen it.
Didn't you write a testimonial, Francisco? No, I actually, it happened one time. I was at the Eagle and someone dropped a bottle of poppers and all of us started dilating. It was great. But in terms of poppers, I want to add to this, because what Jordan just said is the relationship you have with the substance.
That's a brilliant.
The harmful aspect is that the concept of that one drug is more harmful than the other and shaming that's the harm more than anything. But what you're saying, Viviana, I totally agree with you. Poppers, I've seen folks like they're no longer around because of poppers overuse. It caused so much brain damage from using it too much. But just like everything, substances, sex toys, porn, sugar, and so on, everything in moderation. And your relationship with these is what will help you enjoy it longer and reduce the impacts of harm on you. But you're right. I think people need to understand, just like with any other substance, the implications of doing poppers too much. It's very often forgotten. And I've remembered, hooking up with guys and it's like popper, and not realizing told the person, I'm like, the smell of it triggers my migraine.
Eventually, he wants
right.
Yeah,
So
plus, I mean, kind of the main reason that I use this topic, it is because there is not so much stigma around this product.
Yeah, no, I love the question.
So it's easier to talk about something so normal instead of like talking about cocaine or talking about other substance, right? So when you talk about poppers, they're like, well, I use that, but I never got to have an explanation about that. Of course, if
it sounds innocent and safe enough that you end up using it without understanding sometimes the harm.
I guess it's normalizing the conversation around it is what's important.
Yeah, and pretty much my concept here, my point was more to be able to have this discussion, and then for the viewers to have this discussion about something, because at the end of the day, it's another substance that can create side effects. So if you want to talk to somebody, you can use this example because it will be more easier for a friend for you to talk about this. And if you don't have to disclose something else, you're going to use it. Because at the end of the day, any substance that you don't use smart, it will have side effects. So you can use this example to talking to somebody about how harm reduction will work with a substance or a product such as this. And it will be more easy to have a conversation. And it will be so normal for the community to talk about this because who hasn't used it? Well, I haven't, right?
It's how I take fists.
I get a headache and only works like 2 seconds, so I don't know what it's about. But no, thank you for talking about this. But I was just having to, to have this conversation for viewers to have an example. How can they discuss other substance, other products without the stigma? They can use something such as this, and then at the end of the day, harm reduction applies to everybody when it comes to that. And then we just had this conversation from the program, right? We were talking about so general, and it applies to all the substances that are not well.
Or not, right? I mean, one of the things that we all use at one point in our lives, not everybody, is alcohol or nicotine, right? And so, and you know how well that has gone, right? And how difficult it is to say to someone. I think the thing about harm reduction is a tool, but it's not the only thing to use when you think somebody is drinking too much because they've been isolated for months and they only see people on Zoom, right? Lots of people were doing that, right? Or we're doing more weed and that kind of stuff. So the approach, I think, is key to what Jordan said, is a relationship and what your sense of entitlement is in relation to saying, I'm going to tell you all and the viewers what they should be doing.
Oh, I don't think.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. And you're absolutely right. We're not, and definitely we are not here to tell our viewers what they would be doing, but to understand the certain basics around what we're talking about today, harm reduction, substances. And again, it's so important, the relationship that is the person, the individual has with the substances is so critical to understand for the person who's using, not for the person who's trying to save them. Right, that's so important. And
hold on, and sorry not to interrupt, but you touched on something. For me, the relationship was I wanted it to be a positive experience. So without telling anybody how they should deal with that, when I was in the circuit party, whatever, I was like the mother hen. I always, before doing anything new, or we're going out to a big party and we're doing this substance tonight, I always went on and read everything about it. What happens if you overdose? What happens of that? And then if my friends say I'm taking this the first time tonight, I try to also have with me some tools of understanding what my friends who are going out with me might be using if something happens, kind of thing. But that was just me. I wanted a positive experience out of it, so I tried to educate myself on it.
And that's so important. And speaking of this, actually, that brings me to what I was going to say, Antoine. TorontoVibe.com. TorontoVibe.com is such a great website. I use it all the time, even when they did bar outreach, because it's so easy to pull up on the phone. If someone has a question about any substance on there that's used within the community or not within the community, even steroids, pot, alcohol, opiates, fentanyl, poppers, it's all on there. Have a look. It tells you about its interactions with HIV medication, the symptoms, how it feels, why someone might be using, how long a dose lasts for, how to consume it. It's all on there. Amazing website. TorontoVibe.com, amazing websites. And that leads me to, we've been saying PNP, party and play, and so on. And some viewers are like, what the fuck are they talking about? So they're like looking at us like deer in headlights. Speaking of which, it's a term that's been trademarked by the gay, bi, queer, men who have sex with men community, but it does not mean that it does not apply to the hetero community, heteronormative community either. It's all across the board. But I would like for both of you to tell us more about what is party and play / chemsex. Explain that to us, and some tips and tricks for people that they could do when it comes to party and play.
Francisco, can I take that one first, I guess? Cool. So I call it Chemsex. I know it's PNP in North America, but I think Chemsex just sounds sexier, and that's the European version of PNP.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Oh, cool.
Yeah. It was coined by David Stewart, who's sort of like the godfather of Chemsex, and
such an awesome human. Yeah.
Very awesome human being. So really what that is, it's the use of substances like a stimulant like crystal meth or methadone, sometimes cocaine, or other drugs like GHB or MDMA in a sexual context. So you're having sex and you're doing drugs at the same time, and the drugs are there to enhance the sex. That's sort
and
of
boy, does it ever.
It does. If you're looking to have sex for 3 days with a whole bunch of different strangers, then PNP is the lifestyle for you. But it is, I agree with your statement, Kero, that it is applicable to the heteronormative community, but I think there's a very different entry point for queer folks into PNP, and it tends to be focused around our experiences in community of like the HIV AIDS sort of crisis, and how that sort of stigmatized gay men as being risky, our sex is risky, and there's homophobia, heteronormativity, all sorts of things that feed into our experience of chemsex, like why we would get into it. There's vulnerabilities, I guess, that we have in the community that are different. So
does this apply? Just something came to my mind. We've been talking about men. What about what's going on with the lesbian community in our community? What about the trans community? What is happening there in terms of use and reduction or harm reduction?
Well, what I would add to Jordan is that people do what they can, right? What they can get their hands on. And by that, I don't mean an act of despair. It's just, if you are rich, you want to overdose on caviar, and you can. But if you're not, you overdose on whatever you can get around the corner. So the much bandied concept of social determinants of health comes into place. It's like, what is your privilege in terms of the income you have, your ability to hide these things, your ability to say, hey, I use vodka every night. This is what I do. So it's determined by your housing. It's determined by your workplace. A lot of those things. So in that sense, for me, it's been very important to, and I think Jordan is a prime example of this, is to work with those in the community, in the queer community, cis male and transgender, because you can't take care of the entire world, and frankly they won't be that thankful. The ones in trouble more than the others are us. I mean, no one is stigmatizing cis communities for the use of other substances, right?
Yeah, that's so true. Sorry, did Jordan and Francisco, did you want to answer what Antoine just asked as well in terms of the impacts on other communities?
I can't answer on behalf of the lesbian
We don't know.
community. So we don't.
And I don't. Do we know? Is there anything that you can shed on use? And no, you don't. Okay.
All right. But what I meant to say, maybe it wasn't clear, is that this happens in
applies
other
to-
communities. Absolutely. Well, gym goers, right? Gym goers decide at one point to start using steroids,
Yeah.
much less stigmatized than our using meth or our using, I always say THP. I always get the acronyms wrong. But they choose to do that. So how come straight people, especially straight white guys, can take those risks and they're manly thing to do, and we can't
Yeah.
take our risks? That's what gets to me, right? Is how our own view of it is shows a disparity.
Yeah.
I'd also like to say there's also the association with people of color, right? Like they tend to be criminalized more for
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
talk about the straight white male and the white male privilege and white privilege. That's something that I just thought I'd bring up. So I don't know if you want to say that.
No, I really appreciate you bringing that up, Ticha, because I actually was going to bring that up in terms of people of color. I work with people of color very closely. I'm a person of color myself, and it's been such a huge focus of mine when it comes to PNP and Chemsex. And there are few things that people of color, layers that people of color face more during use of substances, and one
And
of
the
them is
trans
very
community.
often people of color will use more on in isolation than in groups because the stigma is higher around people of color than it is around white cisgender gay men. And so within the segregated community, there's further segregation. There's also within the PNP community, the party and play chemsex community, people of color are fetishized very often for their skin color during PNP. So there are those harm reduction components that need to be added to the conversation when it comes to people of color as well. So thank you for bringing that up, and it's so important to remember that. So what Francisco's saying also is that there's a marginalized community, and then within these communities, there's several marginalized other communities, and the use with each community differs from one another. But all these marginalized community that belong within the 2S LGBTQ+, we're always stigmatized and shamed in one way or another compared to a cisgender straight man, white man who's using. And I see it here in Oshawa. I go to the gym here, and every single one of them is definitely on human growth hormone, like jacked.
Wow.
But it's beautiful, but oh my God, does it ever motivate me to work out? But it's also, I remember just watching and I was like, they won't be shamed. But within the gay community, it's like a gay man using steroids, like, oh, he's using steroid, it's all artificial and so on. And we hear this very often as well. Those impact the relationship with the substance use as well, that the person may have from hearing this constantly from others. So I just wanted to add my
Wow, we added a lot of value to the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if you let me say something,
Sure.
I really want to thank Antoine for just bringing out about the trans community, because when we are part of the LGBTQ2+ community, but other programs and services and things that always come up, they're not include the necessities of the trans community.
I will always speak up on that. Yes.
And to me, sometimes it's some sort of hard to talk about it, because I either had to decide to talk being a trans or being a Latina. So I had two sides to either talk about, and it's really hard. And when you sit around a table, when you don't have that much support, and then there's not much education about the trans community, it's really hard to express your point, because you don't know if you're gonna get any, kickback saying that's not how it is. But it reflects the needs of education around the trans community for this, I don't want to say again intervention programs, but for this programs that are there for the MSM community can also benefit the trans community, because we are in the middle between the cis community and the gay community, but there's nothing really in place for the trans community. So thank you so much for you bringing this up, because it will be much easier for somebody else to see the needs about.
I think there's a lot of stigma with using, and then on top of that, you have the layer of already being judged by our own community. So it's probably very harmful. And I know a lot of trans community who use in secret and don't disclose it and all that. So I think that we need to speak about more.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about trans women because a lot of programs now are becoming more trans inclusive, but trans masculine inclusive mostly.
That's the thing.
And trans women are there's a big need. You're absolutely right about that, Viviana. I see it, I hear it. Sex workers, you know, there is a big need that needs to be addressed. Where can they go? Right. So I think this is a question for
another
the
episode.
viewers and everyone's like, where can they go? What could they do? I think we need to do better as well in regards to that. But and within our own community, the 2S LGBTQ2 plus community, we need to make sure that trans is not just trans masculine, right? So I think that's so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, so it's a full conversation. There's so much that we could keep on talking about this, and I want to thank you, guests, for this insightful conversation. We are running out of time, but we are gonna go on a break right now. So viewers, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I'm scheduling my post-quarantine hookup itinerary.
I'm exploring every nook and cranny of self-love.
I'm engaging with online fetish communities I never even knew existed.
I am flattening that curve, honey. Ugh, tighter. Oh, tighter. Ugh.
We are back, guests. I want to give you both the time to share more about the topic today because I think it's so important. And so that being said, is there something today that you want to make sure that you want to send as a message to our viewers and us, the co-hosts, in terms of what we talked about?
Well, one of you.
Oh, okay.
Don't go all
Jordan, you want to go first?
I'll go first. I just want to reemphasize something that I was talking about earlier about being inquisitive about people's drug use and being willing to ask questions around it. I think there's another thing I want to talk about, which is, you know, we encourage people who use drugs to be honest about their drug use, right? To come clean, to tell us about their drug use. And then when they do, we shame them. We tell them they need to go to treatment. We make decisions for them. We infantilize them. We take things away from them like jobs or relationships or social esteem. And I think one of the things that as a community we can do better is creating the conditions in which we're like non-judgmental and it's safe for people to be honest about PMP. So
thank you.
Not punishing people when they come forward with this or going like recoiling in terror. I've had so many people do that in my life when they're like, when they found out what I was doing, they just were like, oh my God, that's so horrific. You know, no, create a really safe space for people. Come in with no judgments and preconceptions, find out what it means to them, right? So
thank you. Very beautiful.
That's excellent. Thank you, Jordan. Francisco.
Well, for me, two things, and they have technical names. One is what I mentioned earlier was the idea of intersectionality. Every person is a world. It doesn't mean that we can't have programs for different groups. That's a different story. But people are an intersection of the money they have, the social standing they have in a community, all those things. And that needs to be you need to be inquisitive about it. That's a great word, Jordan, for sure. And mostly before you decide that you have to do something about your friend and their problem is see what your entitlement is and what you can really do. If you really can't do anything, just, shut up, as Maxine Waters said, shut up your mouth. Right? So that's one thing. The second is this idea of stigma, which is so trendy now and everybody's using it. I had the chance to lead research and national research on index and people living with HIV. One of the great misunderstandings about stigma and stigmatizing the use of substances and alcohol and nicotine and sugar and everything is that we think that is something that we can measure and we can correct, and then it'll be gone. But stigma is a social tool that we use, right, all the time. And yes, when it's out of control and problematic, becomes racism, misogyny, and those kinds of things. But these are the kinds of things that need to be understood at the children level. God forbid I'm mentioning children, right? Throughout the schooling, that they will discriminate. We do that, but it's how and the intention behind it, the impact on others that we need to understand. And so the stigma of drugs, keep it for yourself, because I think it can be, we can stigmatize a lot of different things if we just use the word in a very easy way. So I hope that makes sense. That's my
Actually, that does make sense. I'm thinking there's fat shaming, age shaming, all the stigmas that you have to deal with. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for that. And now I want to go to our co-hosts. What do you have to say about the conversation we had today, starting with Ty? You've been quiet.
Well, actually, I've been actively listening. And I mean, yeah, it's obviously been very informative, I'm sure, not just to all of us sitting here, but to all our viewers out there. And I think it's just been fantastic to talk about all these things so candidly today, because it's really, really important. I know because in community, it is itself, not everyone is very open to talking about this. I know I've had these conversations with Jordan before, saying like when it comes to certain communities, especially marginalized communities, they're not really open to talking about, PNP or Chemsex or anything for that matter, even if they're very much part of it. So I think it is very necessary to bring conversations like this to the table, normalize it, so people come forward and don't have that shame or stigma to have conversations relating to PNP and Chemsex. But yeah, thank you. This was a great opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, fabulous hair tie. I just want to.
Yeah, I miss the days.
Herbal Essences commercial hair. Wait, speaking of hair, Viviana.
I think
the only
thing I can say is that this conversation is not meant to tell people what to do or how to exactly do things. This conversation is to start a conversation. The conversation among ourselves is just for your folks to go out there and then see what works for you and how it works for you. So we're not meant to tell you what to do and how to do things.
Thank you.
Every person has, the will of their own responsibility and take care of themselves. So we're just here to start a conversation for individuals who would like to, have this conversation. And yeah, pretty much.
Thank you, Viviana. Ticha.
I have to agree with both Viviana and Ty. And what everybody said is that this is creating openness to talk. And I think that's the important part, is people being able, instead of hiding away, because I think it's the hiding away, it's when it could maybe become more of an issue. So openness and talking about it and not having shame. So yes, I agree with both of you. So thank you for saying what you said so eloquently.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. We're done for today. I'm kidding. Antoine.
I honestly don't have anything to add, because I'm not an expert to give any advice, except not to judge, to be open about talking about it, and to just let people have their lives while, being able to help if you're asked to help, kind of thing. But I'm very, very happy that we chose this topic for this month. I thought we had an episode before that kind of led into some of that, and we thought we really want to put the spotlight on this topic. So perfect. Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Antoine. Everyone, viewers, guests, thank you so much once again for being with us today. This was amazing. And it's a conversation that will always evolve. So it's not the last time we're going to be talking about this. I'm looking forward to talking about it over and over and over again as we see the change happening that needs to happen. And I think it's so wonderful that it's that way. But, you know, we have come to the end of our episode today. And until then, I want to say goodbye to our viewers. You can catch this episode on YouTube, Facebook, also msmdurham.com/The Queer Bunch. You could find it on there very easily as well. And information about Party and Play actually is on the website, msmdurham.com. Reminder to check out torontovibe.com. Great website, awesome information about substances, including resources, available resources out there, people that they could go to, groups and therapists, and even finding a doctor for HIV services as well. So it's fantastic. Now, more details will be found in the description about this episode today. But until then, I want to wish everyone to keep safe, stay diligent, and most importantly, keep being resilient. It's one of the things I love about being a human. And from our queer family to yours, goodbye.
Bye.